Rain hammered the windows of Rose City Dojo like a furious drumline, each drop adding to the restless rhythm of a night that felt heavier than the others. The fluorescent lights above flickered in uneven pulses, casting long, crooked shadows across the mats. Most of the fighters had already left, shouting goodbyes and slinging gym bags over their shoulders as they vanished into the stormy darkness outside. But one man was still moving quietly through the hallways. Grant Miller, the janitor. He pushed a mop across the mat in slow circles, each movement steady, practiced, almost meditative. His boots were old, soles thinning. His hoodie was faded and stretched from too many wash cycles. His eyes, though, those storm-gray eyes, held a calmness that didn't match the rest of him. He worked the late shift to pay rent. He worked extra shifts to buy food. He worked harder to pretend everything was fine for his daughter. A single dad trying to hold life together with trembling hands. Tonight he was exhausted, not just physically but in a way that seeped into bone, into breath, into soul. The door from the back hallway slammed open. Tyler Rhodes, the dojo's rising star and three-time state champion, walked out with the swagger of someone who had never been humbled. Not once, not ever. His black belt hung loose around his waist, still gleaming from tonight's training session. Behind him followed his two friends, both grinning, both holding their phones ready like predators waiting for entertainment. Tyler tossed his gloves onto the mat. "Yo, mop guy," he said loudly, voice bouncing across the room. "You alive over there, or is this your ghost still mopping after death?" His friends laughed. Grant didn't respond. He'd seen men like Tyler before, loud, proud, empty on the inside. He kept mopping. Tyler stepped closer. "You hear me," he said with a smirk, "or do I need to talk slower so your janitor brain can process it?" Grant finally lifted his head. He didn't glare. He didn't flinch. He didn't even react the way Tyler expected him to. He just looked at him. A silent, steady look that made Tyler's smile tighten for a split second. "What?" Tyler scoffed. "You gonna stare at me all night?" Grant went back to his mopping. And that, more than anything, got under Tyler's skin. Because Tyler wasn't used to being ignored. "You know what?" Tyler said, stepping backward onto the mat. "Come up here, let's have some fun, a friendly spar." His friends perked up immediately. "Oh hell yeah," one laughed. "This is gonna be hilarious," the other added. They lifted their phones. Grant's grip tightened imperceptibly on the mop handle. He remembered the call from his daughter's school earlier that day. He remembered the overdue rent, notice taped to his door. He remembered the ache in his chest from years of swallowed anger. He set the mop aside. Slowly, quietly, Tyler's eyebrows shot up. "Oh, janitor wants to play. Don't break a hip, old man." Grant stepped onto the mat. And everything changed. Because the way he walked, the way he carried himself, the way his posture shifted. It wasn't clumsy. It wasn't hesitant. It was controlled, balanced, dangerous. Tyler's smirk faltered just a hair, but he masked it quickly. "You got gloves?" Tyler asked mockingly. Grant shook his head. "I don't need gloves," he said calmly. His voice was low, steady, a voice that had once commanded rings, not cleaned them. Tyler laughed loudly. "Bro, this guy thinks he's a badass. This is gold." Phones kept recording. Tyler bounced on his toes, throwing light jabs into the air. "All right, mop man, let's dance." They circled each other. Tyler moved like a showman, big steps, exaggerated confidence, eyes darting to the cameras. He threw the first jab, playful, clearly not serious. Grant didn't even blink. He simply leaned his head an inch to the left. Tyler threw another. Grant slipped it with the ease of someone brushing away a fly. His friends started whispering. "Wait, does he know how to fight?" "Nah, impossible, he's a janitor." Tyler's jaw twitched. He stepped forward and threw a real punch, fast and clean. Grant moved before the punch was even halfway there. Not ducking. Not stepping back. Just sliding sideways with perfect timing. Tyler's fist sliced through empty air. What the? Grant spoke quietly, almost politely. Is that all? The room froze. Tyler's face turned red. All right, you want to play serious, let's go. He launched forward with a combination, jab, cross, hook. Grant flowed around each punch like water slipping past rocks. No panic. No fear. Just precision. And then, it happened. The moment the entire gym would talk about for years. Tyler stepped in with a wild right hook. Grant's footwork snapped into place, perfect angle, perfect balance, and he tapped Tyler's leg just enough to break his stance. Tyler stumbled. His eyes widened. Grant's left hand tapped his shoulder, not even a punch, just a reminder. A reminder that Grant could have ended it right there. Careful, Grant murmured. Your balance is sloppy. Phones recorded everything. Tyler's friends exchanged looks of shock. Bro, he's toying with him. This guy's not normal. Tyler's pride shattered. His mask cracked. He grit his teeth and came charging forward recklessly. Grant sighed. And then the janitor moved. Not fast. Not flashy. Just efficient. A slip. A pivot. A tap to Tyler's wrist. A light push on the elbow. A subtle shift of the shoulder. In less than a second, Tyler was face down on the mat before the cameras could even refocus. The room went silent. The only sound was Tyler's shocked, ragged breath. Grant stepped back, giving him space. Are you okay? Tyler pushed himself up, humiliated, furious. You got lucky, he snapped, stumbling to his feet. Grant didn't speak. Tyler launched again, wild and desperate. Grant didn't counter. He didn't strike. He didn't hurt him. He simply redirected each attack with surgical precision, hands barely touching, guiding, turning, neutralizing. A master handling a child. Tyler's aggression drained into confusion, then fear. Finally, Grant stepped back and shook his head. This isn't sparring anymore, he said softly. You're angry, that's how people get hurt. Tyler froze mid-breath. Grant turned away. Walked off the mat. Picked up the mop. Started cleaning like nothing happened. And that, the quiet dismissal, humiliated Tyler more than any punch ever could. You think you're better than me, Tyler shouted, voice cracking. Grant didn't look up, no. He wrung out the mop. You think you're better than yourself. That line hit harder than any knockout. Tyler opened his mouth, but no sound came out. His friends slowly lowered their phones. The storm outside raged on, but inside the dojo, it felt like the eye of a hurricane had just passed through. No one spoke. No one laughed. No one dared look Grant in the eye. Because they all understood now. Grant Miller was not just a janitor. He was something else. Something they couldn't name yet. But soon, very soon, the entire city would know. And this was only the beginning. The rain had slowed to a steady drizzle by the time Grant locked up the dojo for the night. The neon reflections on the sidewalk shimmered like broken glass, painting the ground with streaks of red and blue. Grant pulled his hood up and stepped into the cold night, each footstep echoing through the empty street. Behind him, the gym lights dimmed. Inside, Tyler Rhodes was still standing on the mat, staring at the place where his pride had just been shattered. His friends huddled around him, whispering urgently. Bro, what was that? He barely touched you. That wasn't normal. Tyler didn't answer. His jaw clenched, his fists tightening not from pain, but from something worse. Fear. Because for the first time in his life, Tyler Rhodes had no idea what just happened. And the worst part, the janitor hadn't even tried. The video. By midnight, Tyler's friends had already uploaded the spar to their private group chats. But private things never stay private. Within an hour. Who is this janitor? Bro is dodging like a ghost skull. Tyler got folded by a part-time cleaner, loudly crying face. Someone find his name ASAP. Clips spread across Portland's underground martial arts circles like wildfire. Some swore it was staged. Some said Tyler was drunk. Some said the janitor must have been ex-military. But the truth was stranger than all of it. And for the first time in years, the quiet world Grant had built for himself began to shake. Grant's home. Grant's apartment was dim and quiet when he stepped inside. A small space, 2 rooms, peeling paint, leaky faucet, but it was home. It was safe. It was where he raised the only person who kept him breathing. Daddy. Grant froze in the doorway, then smiled softly as his daughter, Emma, peeked out from her room rubbing her eyes. She was 7. Tiny. Brilliant. His entire world. I thought you were asleep, he whispered, kneeling to hug her. I waited, she mumbled into his shoulder. You said you'd read me a story tonight. Guilt tugged at him. He picked up overtime to afford her school trip next month. Now he was late. I'm sorry, he said, smoothing her hair. I should have been here. Emma hugged him tighter. It's okay, just don't be sad. Grant blinked. Why would I be sad? She pulled back and booped his nose. Because you always look sad when you come home from work. Grant exhaled slowly. Kids see everything. He carried her to bed, tucked her in, and read until her breathing slowed and her tiny hands relaxed against her pillow. Only then did he allow the thoughts to return. Tyler. The spar. Eyes watching. Phones recording. He had kept his secrets buried for years. But secrets have a heartbeat. And tonight, his started thudding again. The next morning at the dojo, Grant arrived early as he always did. He liked the peace of it, the silence before the noise. He swept the entrance, wiped the mirrors, scrubbed the mats. Routine. Predictable. Safe. But today, nothing was safe. Whispers followed him like shadows. That's him. Dude, look at the video. I watched it 10 times. He didn't even break a sweat. Is he like some kind of retired pro? Grant kept working, pretending he couldn't hear anything. But he heard everything. When he pushed the cleaning cart into the main room, he found Tyler already there. The young fighter stood stiffly, arms crossed, eyes bloodshot like he hadn't slept. Grant nodded politely, mourning. Tyler's jaw twitched. We need to talk. Grant didn't stop cleaning. About what? You embarrassed me. Grant paused mid-wipe. I didn't intend to. You made me look weak, Tyler snapped. No, Grant said simply. You made yourself look weak. Silence. Explosive silence. Tyler stepped forward, fists clenched. Who are you? Seriously. Nobody moves like that unless. Before he could finish, the dojo door swung open. Coach Ramirez entered, grizzled, sharp-eyed, built like a tank, a veteran fighter who had trained champions for 20 years. He had heard the whispers, too, and he had spent all night watching the clip. Grant, Ramirez called out, My office now. Tyler smirked as if Grant were finally in trouble. Grant quietly followed the coach into the small office lined with faded championship posters. Ramirez closed the door behind them. Then he said the last thing Grant wanted to hear. Where did you learn to move like that? Grant swallowed. I didn't. Ramirez cut him off. Don't lie, I've trained hundreds of fighters. None of them move like you. So unless you were born in a monastery, you've been hiding something. Grant stared at the floor. Ramirez leaned in. You ever fight professionally? Grant's fingers curled. A memory flashed. A roaring crowd. Blinding lights. Blood on the canvas. A referee screaming for medics. Grant inhaled sharply. That life is behind me, he said. Ramirez's eyebrows rose. So it was a life. Grant didn't answer. Ramirez leaned back in his chair. I don't know who you were, but I know this. The kid needed that lesson last night, and maybe you're exactly the kind of fighter this place needs. Grant stepped back. I'm not a fighter, not anymore. Ramirez studied him. That's not what the footage says. Grant stiffened. You saw it. Everyone did. Grant's stomach dropped. He thought he was invisible. He thought he had erased that world. He thought he could quietly mop floors forever. But fate had a way of dragging people back into the things they ran from. We could use someone like you, Ramirez said. Not as a fighter, unless you want to, but maybe as an assistant coach, part-time, better pay than cleaning. Grant lifted his head slightly. What about the janitor job? I can find someone else for that, Ramirez said plainly, but I can't find another fighter like you. Grant hesitated. Images flashed through his mind. Emma smiling. Emma laughing. Emma eating pancakes on Sundays. A better paycheck meant a better life for her. But returning to the ring. That meant facing ghosts. He wasn't sure he could survive again. Before he could answer, Ramirez sighed. At least consider it, the coach said. We're not done talking about this. Grant left the office. Tyler stood outside waiting. What'd he say? You getting fired? No. Then what? Nothing you need to worry about. Tyler stepped close, glare sharp. I'm not done with you. Grant gave him a calm, tired look. Go home, kid. Tyler's eye twitched. You're scared, he said. Grant almost laughed. Of you. No, Tyler said. Of yourself. Grant didn't respond. Because Tyler wasn't wrong. And that scared him more than anything. At school pickup. That afternoon. Grant waited outside the school gates as children poured out in noisy waves. Emma came running toward him, backpack bouncing. Daddy, she shouted. Grant lifted her into a hug before she could crash into his legs. How was your day? He asked. She grinned. We had art class. I drew you and me fighting a dragon. Grant smiled genuinely for the first time that day. That sounds amazing. She handed him a crumpled paper, stick figures, a big dragon, tiny Emma holding a crayon sword, Grant holding a mop like a weapon. Grant blinked, surprised. A mop, he said. Yeah, she giggled, because you can fight anything. Grant's smile faded slowly. Kids really do see everything. The visitor. That night, after Emma fell asleep and the rain returned, Grant sat by the window staring at the city lights, thinking of Ramirez's offer, thinking of Tyler's words, thinking of a past he had buried under guilt and shame. A soft knock at the door broke his thoughts. He frowned. No one visited him. He approached cautiously, opened the door, and froze. It wasn't a neighbor. It wasn't a delivery. It was a tall man in a dark coat, rain dripping from his hair, eyes intense and familiar in a way that made Grant's stomach twist. Hello, Grant, the man said quietly. Grant's blood turned to ice. He hadn't heard that voice in years. Didn't think I'd ever see you again, the man continued. But then a certain video started circulating. Grant's heart pounded. Seems the world is remembering you, the man said, stepping inside without waiting. And trust me, others are going to come looking. Grant swallowed hard. Why are you here? The man looked him dead in the eye. To warn you. Grant stiffened. Your past isn't dead, the man whispered, and you're out of time. The room fell silent. The storm intensified. Grant felt the world he'd built for his daughter trembling like a fragile wall about to collapse. He closed the door. Because the ghosts he'd tried to escape were finally coming back. The storm raged harder as the tall man stepped into Grant's small apartment, rainwater dripping from his coat and forming dark spots across the carpet. Grant shut the door slowly, his pulse beating against the inside of his ribs. The man stood in the dim light of the living room, broad shoulders, stern jaw, eyes sharp as cold steel. Time had carved new lines into his face, but Grant would have recognized him even in a crowd of thousands. Mason, Grant said quietly. Mason Hale. His old corner man, his last friend from the fighting world, the only witness to the night Grant lost everything. What are you doing here? Grant asked, though he already knew the answer. Mason looked around the small apartment, the cracked walls, the tiny kitchen, the stack of overdue bills half hidden under a newspaper. So this is what you disappeared into, Mason murmured. A ghost cleaning floors instead of standing in rings. Grant crossed his arms. I didn't disappear, I quit. Mason gave him a sharp, humorless smile. No, Grant, you ran. Grant's jaw tightened. I had to. Mason didn't argue. He just dropped onto the old couch and let out a heavy sigh, one that carried years of unspoken history. You saw the video, Grant said, already knowing the answer. Mason nodded. Everyone saw the video. Grant closed his eyes for a moment. That spar, something so small, so stupid, had just put a spotlight back on him. A spotlight he'd fought to escape. Mason leaned forward, elbows on his knees. The world thinks you're dead, he said. The world thinks the fighter you used to be disappeared after that night. Grant swallowed. Good. Not anymore, Mason replied. That kid you embarrassed, Tyler Rhodes, his father is sponsoring a regional championship this year. He's connected, and he's pissed. Grant said nothing. Mason's eyes narrowed. If he starts digging into you, he'll find your name. And Grant, your name leads to a past people haven't forgotten. Grant's throat tightened. And some of those people, Mason added calmly, want revenge. The room felt smaller, the air heavier. Grant exhaled slowly. I have a daughter now, he said softly. Emma, she's 7. Mason blinked, surprised. You a dad? Grant nodded. Everything I do is for her. Mason rubbed his forehead. Then you need to be even more careful. Grant stepped back, leaning against the wall. His hands trembled ever so slightly. Why now, he whispered, after all these years? Mason's voice turned low, grim. Because the man from that night, the one who swore he'd hunt you down if he ever found you, he's resurfaced. Grant's chest tightened painfully. You mean? Yes, Mason said, Adrian Voss. Grant closed his eyes. A name heavy with blood, destruction, and guilt. A name he had prayed would stay buried forever. The night everything fell apart. Grant didn't speak for a long time. Finally, Mason stood up. Grant, you can't keep running. Voss will find you eventually. That video made it inevitable. Grant shook his head. I'm not that man anymore. Mason stepped closer. Maybe not, but the world doesn't care, and Voss certainly doesn't. Grant's heartbeat thudded in his ears. You need to be ready, Mason said. Grant's voice cracked. I don't fight. That's a lie. Grant's jaw clenched. You may not train, Mason continued, but what I saw in that video, that wasn't rust. That wasn't luck. That was instinct. Years of instinct that haven't left you. Grant didn't respond. Because deep down, he knew Mason was right. The ring never really left him. Emma walks in. Suddenly, a small voice came from the hallway. Daddy. Both men turned sharply. Emma stood there rubbing her eyes, holding her stuffed bear, her hair messy from sleep. She blinked at Mason curiously. "Who's he?" Grant forced a soft smile. "Just an old friend, sweetheart. Go back to bed." But Emma didn't move. She walked straight to Grant and held onto his leg, sensing the tension. Mason softened instantly. "She looks like her mom." Grant's chest tightened. He looked away. Emma clung tighter. "Are you leaving again?" Grant kneeled. "No, I'm right here." She looked between Grant and Mason, then whispered, "Daddy, are the bad people coming?" Grant inhaled sharply. "Why would you say that?" "You look scared," she said simply. Grant felt his heart break. Kids feel everything. He hugged her tightly. "No bad people will hurt you, ever, I promise." Emma nodded sleepily and wandered back to her room. Mason waited until her door closed. "She shouldn't have to live in fear because of your past," he said quietly. Grant glared at him. "And I won't let her." "Then listen to me," Mason replied. "You need to come back. Even if you don't fight professionally, train, get strong again, because Voss isn't coming for a spar." Grant felt a cold chill crawl up his spine. He wished Mason was exaggerating. He was. He never had. The offer. Mason pulled out an envelope from inside his coat. "What's this?" Grant asked. "A way out or a way back in. Depends on how you look at it." Grant opened the envelope. Inside was a flyer. "West Coast Open Fighters Welcome. Prize, $150,000. Grant stared at it. Mason continued, "You enter this tournament, you get noticed. You get protected. Sponsors, gyms, networks, trust me, once they see who you are, no one will dare touch you, not even Voss." Grant shook his head immediately. "I'm not entering anything." Mason stepped closer. "Then you better pray Voss never finds you, and you better be ready to protect your daughter if he does." Grant's blood ran cold. The room felt too loud, too small. The storm outside intensified. Grant clutched the flyer, hands trembling. He didn't want this life. He didn't want the violence. He didn't want the spotlight. But he wanted Emma safe. More than anything. "Just think about it," Mason said quietly. "I'll be in town for a few days. Call me when you're ready." He placed a card on the table, then walked toward the door. Before leaving, he paused. "One last thing," Mason said without turning back. "The kid Tyler, avoid embarrassing him again. His father isn't the forgiving type." Grant nodded stiffly. Mason opened the door. "And Grant," he said softly, "welcome back to the world." Then he was gone. The quiet aftermath. Grant stood there long after Mason left, staring at the flyer in his hand. $150,000. That money could fix everything. A better home. A safer neighborhood. A future for Emma. But entering that tournament meant letting the world see him, recognize him, remember him. And if the world remembered him, Adrian Voss would remember him too. Grant felt the weight of the past crushing him from all sides. He sat down on the couch, buried his face in his hands, and let the storm swallow the silence around him. Meanwhile, elsewhere in Portland, in a dim office lit only by a desk lamp, Tyler Rhodes replayed the spar video again and again, each time feeling the sting in his pride. He zoomed in on Grant's movements. Slips, angles, footwork, control. That wasn't a janitor. No way. Finally, Tyler slammed his fist onto the desk and yanked out his phone. He called someone. "Dad," Tyler said through clenched teeth, "I need your help." Silence. Then a cold voice replied. "What did you do now, Tyler?" Tyler exhaled shakily. "I think I picked a fight with someone dangerous." His father's voice hardened. "Who?" Tyler hesitated, then said the name that would change everything. Grant Miller. There was a long silence. A silence too heavy. A silence too knowing. Then finally, "I'll handle it," his father said. Click. Call ended. Tyler frowned. He didn't know how his father knew the name. He didn't know why he sounded afraid. But he was about to find out. The night ends with a knock. Back in Grant's apartment, he finally stood, ready to throw away the flyer, ready to choose peace and anonymity again. But before he could move, knock, knock, knock. Grant froze. His heartbeat spiked. It was too late for visitors. Too late for mistakes. Too late for danger. He walked slowly to the door, every sense heightened. He gripped the doorknob, opened it a crack, and his heart dropped. Because standing outside wasn't a neighbor. Wasn't Mason. Wasn't Tyler. It was a man he never expected to see again. A man connected to both his past and his destruction. A man who whispered one sentence that made Grant's entire world tilt. "Grant, he knows you're alive." Grant's stomach nodded. "Who?" he breathed. The man's eyes filled with dread. Adrian Voss. The storm outside didn't just rage. It awakened. The next morning arrived with a strange heaviness in the air, quiet, tense, almost like the world was holding its breath for something no one could yet name. The Rose City Dojo sat under a gray Oregon sky, rain clouds stacked like layers of old battles waiting to unfold again. Inside, the fluorescent lights hummed faintly, and the mats looked untouched, as if the chaos from the day before had never happened. But the fighters remembered. Everyone remembered. The clips of Grant effortlessly dropping Tyler Rhodes, Portland's undefeated black belt, had circulated through whispers, text messages, and late-night conversations. It wasn't on social media, but in a way that made it worse. Rumors felt heavier when carried by tongues instead of timelines. By 8 a.m., the dojo was full. Not because of scheduled classes. Because everyone wanted to see if Tyler would show up, and what he'd do if he did. Grant walked in quietly, same cheap shoes, same worn-out jacket, same tired eyes. He didn't seek attention. Attention simply followed him now like a shadow with its own heartbeat. Some of the fighters nodded respectfully. A few stepped aside to make room. A couple even whispered a soft "good morning," something no one bothered offering the janitor before. He didn't respond. He wasn't used to being acknowledged. He just clocked in, grabbed the mop from the storage room, and began working. But the broom handle shook in his hand. Not from fear. From memory. Every time he blinked, Tyler's humiliated face flashed behind his eyes, red cheeks, clenched jaw, the quiet fury of a man who refused to believe what had happened. Grant knew the type too well. He used to be surrounded by them. The bully who loses control. The alpha who can't accept defeat. The man who would rather burn the world than accept being beaten by someone beneath him. The mop squeaked softly across the floor. Grant tried to focus on the repetitive movement, tried to sink into the quiet comfort of routine. Then the front door slammed open. Hard. The sound cracked through the dojo like thunder. Everyone turned. Tyler Rhodes stepped inside, head held high, shoulders stiff, ego wrapped around him like a flame looking for gasoline. Behind him walked two men from another MMA gym, bigger, broader, decorated with tattoos and badly healed knuckle scars. They weren't students. They were enforcers. A statement. Grant exhaled slowly. Here it is. Tyler scanned the room until his gaze landed on him. A thin smile spread across Tyler's face, not friendly, not warm, not even human. The kind of smile a wolf gives before lunging. Well, Tyler said loudly, clapping once, if it isn't the world's most famous janitor. Murmurs filled the room, some nervous, some mocking, some sharp with anticipation. The two outsiders flanked Tyler like bodyguards, arms crossed, eyes locked on Grant like predators studying prey. Grant didn't look up. He simply continued mopping. Tyler walked straight toward him, stopping only when the mop nearly touched his shoes. "That's cute," Tyler sneered, "still pretending you're not scared." Grant didn't respond. Tyler leaned closer. "You embarrassed me in front of my students. In front of everyone, and you think I'm just gonna let that slide?" Grant looked up slowly, so slowly the air itself seemed to tighten. "I'm not fighting you," he said quietly. "Not again. I already told you I don't do this anymore." Laughter erupted around them. Tyler gestured theatrically to the crowd. "Hear that? He doesn't fight, he just knocks out black belts accidentally." The two outsiders chuckled darkly. Grant held his ground. "I warned you," he said. "You didn't listen." Tyler's smirk wavered for a moment, but only a moment. He straightened, folding his arms. "Hear how this goes," Tyler announced. "You me one real spar, no cameras, no excuses, and when I win, which I will, you admit yesterday was a fluke." Grant shook his head. "No." The room went silent. Tyler blinked. "No." "No," Grant repeated. Everyone froze. No one had ever said no to Tyler Rhodes. Tyler's face darkened. "You don't get to refuse." Grant stepped back, lifting the mop as a boundary line. "I'm not here to fight you. I'm here to feed my kid. I'm here to survive, that's all." The mention of his child stunned the students. Many of them had never even considered that the janitor might have a life, a story, responsibilities. But Tyler wasn't stunned. He was enraged. "Oh," Tyler said coolly, "I get it. You're hiding behind the single dad card. Cute." Grant's jaw tightened. Tyler stepped closer. "So here's the new rule. You either fight me or you don't work here anymore." He turned to the owner's office behind the glass window. "And trust me, I can make that happen." Grant stiffened. He couldn't lose this job. Not after everything. Not with his daughter depending on him for food, for shelter, for stability. He looked down. "Don't do this," he said softly. Tyler stepped forward until their foreheads nearly touched. "You humiliated me. Now I'm going to humiliate you, in front of everyone." Grant didn't speak. He didn't move. But deep inside him, buried beneath years of self-control, trauma, and regret, something flickered. Not rage. Not fear. Resolve. He looked up again, and this time, there was something colder in his eyes. A ghost of the man he used to be before life shattered him. "Fine," Grant said quietly. The dojo erupted in excitement. "But you need to understand something," he continued, voice low and steady. "If we fight, it won't go the way you think." Tyler smirked. "We'll see." A circle formed. Students lined up around the mats. Some took bets. Others whispered predictions. The outsiders leaned against the wall like bouncers. Grant stepped into the ring slowly, removing his jacket, folding it neatly, placing it in the corner. His shoulders rolled back, not in arrogance, but in muscle memory. His eyes sharpened. His stance shifted. And suddenly, everyone realized something. Grant didn't move like a janitor. He moved like a man who had lived in rings. A man who had trained for war. A man who had once been dangerous. Tyler noticed it too. Just for a second. Grant raised his hands. Tyler attacked first. He always did. He lunged forward with a quick jab, more emotional than strategic. Grant slipped past it effortlessly, like he'd been expecting exactly that angle, that speed, that arrogance. Tyler swung again. Grant stepped aside. Tyler kicked. Grant blocked without even looking strained. The crowd shifted, murmurs rising, confusion mixing with fear. Tyler roared and rushed him, throwing wild combinations. Grant moved like water, calm, fluid, inevitable. When he finally struck back, it was with a single movement. A palm to Tyler's chest. Soft, precise, perfectly timed. Tyler flew backward. Hard. He hit the mat with a thud that echoed through the dojo. The entire room froze. Grant didn't chase him, didn't celebrate, didn't smirk. He simply lowered his hands. Tyler scrambled to his feet, red-faced and seething. "You lucky," he wheezed, charging again. Grant sidestepped. Tyler crashed into the mat again. Whispers grew louder. "That wasn't luck. He's trained. He's skilled. He's better than Tyler." Grant turned his head slightly. "Stop," he said. Tyler wasn't listening. He jumped forward one last time, and Grant's hand closed gently around his wrist. Not harsh, not brutal, but final. Tyler froze. Not because he wanted to, because he suddenly realized he couldn't move. Grant's voice was calm, almost tired. "You're not ready to spar with someone who fights to survive." Tyler's eyes widened. Then Grant released him. Tyler stumbled back, breathing hard, staring at the janitor, not with hate, with fear. Grant picked up his jacket, turned away from Tyler, and began walking toward the storage room. He didn't wait for applause. He didn't wait for permission. He didn't wait for acceptance. He simply walked. And that terrified Tyler more than anything else. Because for the first time in his life, Tyler wasn't the strongest man in the room. He wasn't the most skilled. He wasn't the alpha. He wasn't the king. The janitor was. But the story wasn't done. Because as Grant reached the door, a deep voice cut through the silence. "Hey!" Grant stopped. The older Brazilian instructor, Master Rafael, stepped forward. He had watched the entire fight with arms crossed, expression unreadable. "I need to speak with you," Rafael said. "Now." Grant closed his eyes. Another problem. Another confrontation. Another storm. He turned slowly. "Yes, sir." Rafael studied him for a long moment. A very long moment. Then he said words no one expected. "I know who you are." The room shattered into whispers. Grant's stomach twisted. Not again. Not here. Not in front of his only source of income. But Rafael wasn't finished. "And I know what you're running from." Grant's chest tightened. Rafael stepped closer until his voice was low enough only Grant could hear. "But I also know this. Men like you don't end up mopping floors unless something broke them. And men like me help put them back together." Grant didn't breathe. Not until Rafael added 3 more words that changed everything. "You're not done." And just like that, Grant realized his past wasn't finished with him. His future wasn't optional. And this dojo, this accidental battleground, was about to become the place that forced him to face everything he'd buried. Everything he feared. Everything he used to be. And everything he had to become again. Grant stood frozen, Raphael's words echoing in the heavy silence of the dojo. Conversations whispered behind him like a restless tide, but none of it mattered. Not the stunned faces, not the hushed exchanges, not even Tyler's burning stare from the mat. The world seemed to narrow into one single thread connecting him and Raphael. "You're not done." Those words stabbed deeper than any punch, deeper than any past wound. They were the truth he had spent years trying to smother under exhaustion, parenthood, and survival. Raphael motioned with his head toward his office. "Come." Grant hesitated only a second before following him. Inside, Raphael closed the door softly. No slamming, no dramatics, That made it worse. Quiet men seldom wasted words. When they spoke with gravity, the weight could crush mountains. Raphael took a seat behind his desk, fingers laced together, elbows resting on the polished wood. Grant stayed standing. The master studied him for several long seconds, eyes sharp but not cruel. "You hit it well," Raphael said finally, "but not well enough for someone who's lived his life watching fighters pretend they're something they're not." Grant didn't respond. "You weren't improvising out there," Raphael continued. "You weren't lucky, you weren't guessing." He leaned forward. "You were calculating." Grant's pulse thudded. Raphael nodded, confirming his suspicion. "Your rhythm, your footwork, the way you redirected energy instead of blocking it, the timing of your counters." He tapped his desk. "That wasn't janitor movement. That wasn't hobbyist movement. That was a man who trained to end fights quickly, efficiently, or die." Grant breathed out slowly. Raphael watched him. "So tell me, why is someone like you pushing a mop for minimum wage?" Grant swallowed. "I just needed work." "Everyone needs work," Raphael said, "but not everyone chooses a place full of fighters when they're trying to hide what they can do." He tilted his head. "Unless they came here by accident or fate." Grant's jaw tightened. Raphael's silence pressed him to speak, but Grant resisted. Not out of defiance, out of fear. The past wasn't something he opened lightly. After several long seconds, Raphael changed his approach. "You have a child, yes?" Grant flinched. "Yeah, my daughter." "How old?" "7." Raphael nodded. "Then you understand why I ask what I'm about to ask." His tone sharpened. "Are you in trouble? Is she in danger?" Grant's chest tightened. "No, nothing like that." "Then you are running from yourself," Raphael said plainly. Grant didn't answer. That was enough confirmation. Raphael leaned back in his chair. "I'm not here to expose you. I'm not here to fire you. I'm not here to exploit whatever you're hiding." He folded his arms. "But I am here to tell you something important. Ignoring who you are will not protect the girl. If anything, it will make her future harder." Grant's eyes dropped. "I can't go back to that life." "Then don't," Raphael shrugged. "But you also can't keep pretending you're weak." "I'm not." "You are acting weak," Raphael cut in. "And yet, inside you is a man who knows how to survive, how to fight, how to lead, how to defend." He pointed toward the gym. "They all saw it today, even Tyler." Grant winced. "That's exactly the problem." Raphael's gaze softened in a surprising way. "Humility is good, Grant. Hiding is not." Grant closed his eyes. "You have a past," Raphael said quietly. "Good, so do I, so does everyone." His voice lowered. "But the past you are running from, it didn't die, it is waiting for you. And if you don't face it, it will find you again, and this time maybe when your daughter is standing beside you." Grant's throat tightened. Raphael finally stood up. "I won't push you to tell me. When you're ready, you will. But for now, I need only one thing from you." Grant looked up. "Train." Grant blinked. "What?" "You heard me," Raphael said. "Train." His expression hardened. "Not for tournaments, not for medals, for discipline, for control, for your daughter, for your life." He walked to the door and opened it. "You don't get to bury this gift. It will eat you alive." Grant stood frozen. "And Grant," Raphael added as he stepped out, "if you don't train, then someone like Tyler will push you again. Next time harder, dumber, or with people who don't respect limits." Grant exhaled shakily. He knew Raphael was right. He'd known long before the master said it. He'd known since the moment he saw Tyler walk in with those outsiders, men who would hurt someone without hesitation, men who reminded him of shadows he once escaped. He nodded once, a small but seismic decision. "Okay." Raphael's eyes warmed with approval, not excitement, not pride, respect. "Good," he said. "Meet me tomorrow morning before the gym opens." He walked away. Grant stood there alone in the office, heart pounding, wondering how everything in his life had shifted so fast. How the world he tried so hard to escape had found him again. He looked down at his hands, calloused, scud, capable. How long had it been since he allowed himself to feel strong? Outside the office, the crowd dispersed slowly. Conversations buzzed around the mats as students tried to make sense of what they'd witnessed. Tyler Rhodes was still sitting on the mat, chest heaving, humiliation and confusion twisting his face. His two hired outsiders were whispering in his ear, but he hardly seemed to hear them. He was staring at the office door, at the man who had walked inside moments earlier, the man who made him feel powerless. For the first time in Tyler's life, rage wasn't the loudest thing in him. Fear was. Grant finished cleaning in silence. No one interfered. No one mocked him. Some even watched him with a new kind of respect, one that made him feel uncomfortable. He didn't want admiration. He didn't want attention. He didn't want recognition. He just wanted to get through each day without falling apart. When he finally stepped outside into the cool drizzle of Portland's late afternoon, he pulled out his phone. A photo of a little girl with missing front teeth and messy pigtails lit up the screen. His daughter, Lily. She was the reason for everything. The reason he put aside the person he used to be. The reason he swallowed pride, shame, fatigue, and fear. The reason he worked 3 jobs last year until his hands bled. The reason he ran from a world where violence was currency. But now that world was knocking again. And this time there was no running. He shoved the phone into his pocket, took a deep breath, and walked down the wet sidewalk toward home. He didn't see the car across the street following him slowly. He didn't see the silhouette in the passenger seat. He didn't hear the voice whisper, "That's him." He didn't know his past had just found him again. Morning came fast. Before sunrise, Grant stood quietly inside the empty dojo. The lights flickered on one by one, casting long shadows across the mats. He wasn't wearing janitor clothes. Not today. Old sweatpants. Faded fight shoes. A plain black t-shirt. A man trying to remember who he was. Raphael entered a moment later, holding 2 sets of gloves. "Good," the master said. "You came." Grant nodded. Raphael tossed him the gloves. "Warm up." Grant wrapped his hands, trying to steady his breathing. Shadows danced on the walls as he stretched, rolled his shoulders, shook out old stiffness. "You haven't trained in years," Raphael said, circling him. "I can see it in your tension, but I can also see something else." Grant glanced at him. "You haven't lost it," Raphael said simply. "Not the instinct, not the awareness, not the timing. Those things don't fade, they bury themselves until something wakes them." Grant swallowed. Yesterday wasn't supposed to happen. "Things never happen when they're supposed to," Raphael replied. "They happen when they must." Grant finished rapping. Raphael nodded at him to step forward. "Let's see who you used to be." Grant inhaled slowly. Then he moved. The first punch he threw felt foreign, stiff, rusty. Raphael parried easily. The second was smoother. The third was memory. Raphael tested him, shifting angles, changing timing, probing weaknesses. Grant followed, not perfect, not polished, but undeniably skilled. Footwork returned. Calm breathing returned. Focus returned. Every punch, every block, every counter felt like a door opening inside him, flooding him with memories. Good ones, painful ones, ones he had locked away when Lily was born. After 20 minutes, Raphael raised a hand. "Enough." Grant stepped back, breathing hard but focused. Raphael nodded once deeply. "You're not just a fighter," he said. "You were elite." Grant stiffened. Raphael's voice lowered. "Tell me the truth. Were you military, underground leagues, private security? What exactly were you?" Grant's jaw clenched. Silence stretched. He finally whispered, "I was a problem." Raphael absorbed this quietly. "And who made you into that problem?" he asked. Grant looked toward the door. His voice was almost a breath. "The same people who are looking for me now." Outside, unseen by both men, a figure watched through a rain-speckled window. A figure who lifted a phone and murmured into it. "I found him.